Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Comic Source. I'm your host, Jace. Another massive Monday episode talking about a massive publishing project. Today, we're here to talk about Ramgod. First issue's already come out, dropped on July 24th. I have the co-creators here to talk about the book. Gentlemen, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourselves and what your role is on Ramgod.
Cool.
Yeah,
go ahead.
We're brothers, if the last name didn't give it away. So I'm Morgan.
I'm Owen.
And we have the Brothers Bloom. We're both co-creators, co-writers on this series, and kind of art directed the whole thing too. We didn't illustrate it, but we worked with the artists with like a very clear vision in mind. Very collaborative process, and it's been pretty awesome so far.
Yep. I'm co-creator, co-writer of the process. Morgan's younger brother. Newer to the comic graphic novel space, and this is like my first title as a writer, creator. So the nerves are going, firing on kind of all cylinders. But it's been quite the journey and a long time coming, and I'm very happy that it's out and it's continuing to come out, and just kind of the response already has been really overwhelming.
Yeah, you say a long time coming, Owen. How long have you two had this idea? How long, from the initial idea till seeing fruition and having the book out?
Yeah, it's been a journey for sure. We created this idea during COVID, so I guess
March 2024, I guess, something around that. That's when it began.
Yeah. You mean 2020, Morgan?
2020. Yeah. Whoops. I meant 4 years since 2020. My bad.
Yes. It kind of started in like the chaos of like when everyone was, washing down their groceries and Amazon packages, if you can remember that crazy time. And Morgan and I were living together at the time, and we were just kind of like, he was playing, I think, Cyberpunk 2077, and I was like watching Blade Runner 2049. And we just were kind of thinking about this like cyberpunk world and genre as a whole, and we felt like it was untapped. And we're both big sports fans, and we were like, hey, like, what if we like create something where we kind of make a new sport in a cyberpunk world, but that's character driven and like things like that. And hence we got Ramgod out of it. So.
Yeah, Morgan, give us the elevator pitch for those that aren't familiar. Owen mentioned new
Absolutely,
sport. Yeah. That's part. Yeah, that's part of it for me. That's just so interesting.
So it takes place in like 2085-ish, I believe it's like give or take. In this, it's a fictional city, but it could easily be like a New York. It's called New City, but it's meant to feel like a Gotham or like a metropolis where it's just like exists somewhere in the world, and is like a major city. We follow Clint Bowler, who's this 35-year-old patrolman working as a police officer that's kind of like never really like amounted to what he was supposed to be. We learned that he like 15 years, like when he was in college, he was a superstar athlete that was supposed to, be drafted #1 in the NFL and go on to be like the next, future Hall of Famer. But he had gotten himself involved with some bad people that ultimately got him implicated in some like organized crime activity, and thus like he was blacklisted from pro sports altogether for the most part. And so he had to kind of call in some favors to kind of redirect his life and start over. And he wound up, becoming a cop of all things. And fast forward 15 years, he's got this teenage son, Malcolm, that he sees like once a month, and is like trying to find things that they have in common and ways to connect. And ultimately, meanwhile, this league, Ramgod, which is this fairly new sport in this world. So it's been around for a few years, but it's still in its like early stages, but it's growing rapidly, and all the young kids are really into it. And it's a sport that we created that's it's one part. It's like 3 different activities or events to it. It's racing, combat, and climb. And the climb could be going up or down. Like it could be descending down an active volcano or climbing up a skyscraper that like has parts that fall off as you climb. Right. So it's very dangerous. It's not in like a digital world. It's in the real world. And it kind of like is like a traveling circus almost, where it goes to different, cities and places, so that it's constantly bringing live entertainment to the cities and like really helping the economy and things like that. Anywho, Malcolm, Clint's son, 15-year-old son, is like a diehard Ramgod fan, and his favorite team is the Barracudas, which is one of the 8 teams. Now, all 8 teams, or 7 of the 8 teams, are owned by like big corporations. Whereas one team, the Barracudas, is like the people's team. They're crowd funded through like a GoFundMe or like a Patreon type thing. And Malcolm is a proud backer of that team. And ultimately, the league is making a new rule change where every team now needs to add an additional player, a human player, because there's one robot allowed on each team. And so Clint winds up getting sort of a chance to audition for this or like try out for the team, and winds up maybe or maybe not getting a spot on that squad. But what we find out is that one of the teams in Ramgod is actually like notorious bank robbers, and which is where they get a lot of their money for. And so it creates that sort of, we always compare it to the Fast and the Furious and like the original Point Break, right? Where, it's like there's an undercover cop that's trying to figure this out. The difference in our story, there's a couple, but is that our cop has no idea, right? He's a cop with a dark past that has like sort of that anti-hero in him, and isn't, and the more that he goes forward with this new sort of like second chance at his life and dreams, the more he puts himself and his kid in danger. And that's kind of like the essence of the story. I know that was a little bit more than an elevator pitch, but it's a complicated series.
It worked.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. There's so many layers to it. You can read it on that, kind of topmost layer where it's just this really cool action story with tons of fantastic art. But really, there's so much more to it, both in terms of kind of, the mystery, the conspiracy kind of stuff, but really talking about themes of the haves and the have-nots, and fathers and sons and relationships and that sort of thing. So was that purposeful, Owen, when you guys were building it out originally, or did it just kind of happen organically over time as you started plotting out the story?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it's interesting because Morgan and I have definitely different strengths and weaknesses. Morgan is the character guy more so than anything else. He always takes this tight lens to like a big world kind of thing. And for me, it was really like world building. I love probably more than anything else. And like the sports element, as Morgan was talking about with the 3 heats and things like that, if we were going to make this world and we were going to introduce the sport, we obviously had to have characters inhabit this world that were interesting and relatable and dynamic. And Morgan, I think, really kind of pulled that thread and created a great, father-son relationship with Clint and Malcolm, which is really the heart of this story. And I did stuff relating to, like, as I said, the world building and the sport and things like that, which, as we said before, we're big sports fans. And when we were building out this thing, we were like, hey, not everyone who likes one sport likes the other, and what would kind of get them interested in maybe a sport that they don't like as much if they're interested in another. So we were like, well, what if we like kind of make it so that it's like the Olympics, structured in that way and passing the baton kind of thing with a point aggregate system. And we have a thing called boosts, where it's kind of like if Mario Kart and the Hunger Games sponsor gifts had like some weird acid baby kind of thing, where it would give a competitive edge to the players and the team that are competing in one heat, and you could basically pass it to the other sport or other competition, if that makes sense.
Yeah, really cool idea. Well, what made you guys decide to publish this through Massive? I mean, any number of ways you could have done it. You could have crowdfunded it. You could have self-published in another way. What made Massive the right fit?
So there's some history to Ramgod. I was actually at Heavy Metal as the managing editor around time that we started working on this series.
And also, this, by the way, this ties into your first question, which was about like the timeline. So in terms of like when we created it during COVID and why it's been like such a long journey. But Morgan, continue that.
Yeah, so I was the managing editor at Heavy Metal, and also I think like the art director at that time. It was before I was the creative director. And Owen had come to me, was saying like, we had worked on, for a little backstory, Owen and I have been brothers our whole lives, obviously, but had been working on other creative projects together. But this was the first one we actually like co-wrote from inception together, right? Where it's,
because I'm a producer by trade, so like I tend to make other people's creative visions a reality for a living. While Morgan is more of the art director, creative director, writer type person. So he was making his own stuff.
And I had like several titles that were already published. I'm not like a big name in comics by any means, not yet anyway, but had like been doing this professionally for a bit. So Owen came to me saying, I want write something with you. I kind of gave him homework or like a challenge of wow me with something really cool so that I know that you're bringing something to the table and I'm not just carrying you. And he took that and ran with it, and then came up with this really cool like world and premise that I was like, cool, now we need to. He had like archetypes for characters in mind, but as Owen mentioned, I'm like really good at finding like relatable character stories and keeping those grounded. So if you were to remove the setting, the story still feels like it's good. It doesn't need all the bells and whistles and stuff. But anywho, I said, hey, Owen, do you want, like I can get the ear, obviously, of the publishing board. It won't give us any sway by any means, because if anything, they're harder on people that are creating
I was going to say, I think they vetted us even more so. It's like no preferential treatment was happening. Either one, with my brother, he was, if anything, he was more critical and more harsh than someone else would be. And same thing with, his employer at the time. They were like, no, we're not getting preferential treatment. Like, if we're going to take this seriously, we're really going to vet it.
So anyway, we pitched it to them. They fell in love with it, and we're like, yeah, let's do this thing. And we were going to be going, part of our deal with Heavy Metal at the time was like, we just wanted to make sure there was like a drop dead publication date for it. Mm-hmm. Because, having worked in comics and publications, I've seen things kind of get like postponed indefinitely and not make it out. So we had that luckily in our deal. About a year-ish later, something like that, Heavy Metal started looking for like other partners to collaborate on the magazine, as it like the publishing industry as a whole was having some trouble. And so Whatnot, which is Massive's, I think, like subsidiary company or sister company, entered the picture as a potential partner that they were going to like sort of revamp the magazine, the Heavy Metal magazine, together moving forward. And they looked at sort of the Rolodex or slate of upcoming serials, and they saw Ramgod, like, ooh, what's this? And they ultimately were like, can we turn this into? It was supposed to be in the magazine at first. It was like one of the many stories that are broken up into bits.
Right.
But they were like, let's give this its own comic series. We think it's really strong and it'll stand alone on its own and do great. And so they asked us if we want to do that. We said, yeah, let's do it, absolutely. And then that wound up kind of postponing it a little bit more. So we're like, okay. And then ultimately, the entire project kind of got like paused right where we were in the 11th hour, like right about ready to roll with it. And because the company kind of like, I got furloughed as the managing editor, and the whole team, like everything at Heavy Metal, it just went on pause. And that pause lasted a lot. Like it was supposed to be a short pause, and then it's still going on right now. So meanwhile, like a year passed or something like that. And now Heavy Metal had they had paid for the artwork, but didn't have the IP rights, and had missed their drop dead date to publish it and all this other stuff. So like they couldn't even run the artwork that they paid for.
Our project was basically, Ramgod was just stuck in purgatory with them for far too long, and we just had to like kind of claw it back in our own way, and it was all amicable and whatever. But we got it, and then once we got our story back and our IP back, and we paid for it, and took a lot of time and energy.
Well, backing up, before we actually went and bought it back, we wanted to make sure that we had a route for publishing. So we reached out to Massive, who had, was Whatnot, and we said, hey, look, if we can get this back, would you guys still have interest in putting it out? And they were like, hell yeah, absolutely. So we were like, okay, that now knowing that we had a home for it, we negotiated with Heavy Metal and pretty much bought bought back the artwork that they had originally paid for, and then now we owned it. So that was great, and we partnered up with Massive, who publishes creator-owned series, which is awesome for us because that's what we were looking for. Yeah. And they've been great. I mean, they've been marketing the crap out of this thing and making sure it's getting in front of new fans and retailers and comic shops and all that other stuff. So it's been great. Issue 1's done pretty well so far, and we're hoping, and it's been getting really good reviews, which has been awesome for us too. Yeah. And so hopefully, the readership starts to tell everyone else about it, and it catches. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing for creators, not necessarily new creators, but creators who don't necessarily have a high profile. So you're going to be new to a lot of people. One of the hardest things is pacing. And that's always something I look at when I'm reading somebody's work for the first time. Do they have the pacing down? The pacing here it's fast paced, but it's paced well. It's balanced, right? Like sometimes you get something fast paced where when the action scenes are on the page, everything's moving at breakneck speed, but then you get to the character pieces and it starts dragging. There's not really a chance to catch your breath in this first issue. It really ramps up, and it gives this sense of not just danger in the world of competing with Ramgod, but this is really a world that, things aren't going the greatest. You know what I mean? Like, people are, they're striving to, to find something more. And again, I think that brings in the relatability of it on top of the fun action and the great art. So let's talk a little bit about the artist. Was that somebody that Heavy Metal brought to you guys? Was it kind of a lengthy process to find somebody who was going to really nail the visuals? Talk a little bit about finding the right artist for the project.
But we definitely picked all the artists ourselves. We obviously had to get them okayed by Heavy Metal since they were covering the cost, the sticker price of it. But we, I've been, as part of like my job as a managing editor, it's my job to like find the right artist for things and then propose them, right, for on certain series. Like, I found this guy, I think he would work great. I propose it to fellow publishers, the publishing board, and then they're like, yeah, we vote on it or make a decision based off that. So we always do like these like paid tests in the beginning where we scout and find like our best artists. We first make sure that they're available to do this and that we can, they're within our price range. And then we have them, before like just green lighting them based on their portfolio, we'll generally ask them to like, do take like a few pages of it, do some layouts of those few pages, and then we'll pick one of those 3 rough layouts and say, take that one to the final, black and white ink version of it, and then see how that looks. And then when we take our finalists together, we just look at them and we're like, okay, what do we think, guys? And then we went off that. So in doing that process, we found like 2 in particular. We found really 3 that we loved, and we wanted to find a way to work with. So Kanan White is the artist, is the sequential artist that we use for issue 1. He's not in issue 2, but that was a purposeful choice, right? The 6-issue mini arc is sort of like broken into in-season mode, which is like during Ramgod, the sports season, and then the off-season, right, where it's like between the ending of the last season and then going into the next one, where the teams need to now retool and like bring in new players and start training again, like kind of like a Rocky movie where you're like, all right, it's the off-season now, like I lost the first fight, can I come back and like get better? So we thought it'd be really cool stylistically to actually have one artist assigned to in-season Ramgod, and then one artist for the off-season mode. And then so we come back, we introduce Kanan in issue 1, and then it goes into the off-season. And then for the next 3 issues, we go to Henry Prasetya, and then we come back to Kanan to round it out at the end when we resume the season. And then we have another artist named Marco Locati, who we have do only flashbacks, which look the most different, but that was on purpose because it's supposed to like immediately take you kind of like to a different time, right?
Yeah,
so,
that's also like a Morgan Rosenblum signature here. He loves doing the flashbacks in a drastically different art style to kind of
like completely different artist. Like the colors are still very cyberpunky, which you'll see in the next issue. Yeah, I think we introduced flashbacks in the next one. As Owen was saying, I like introducing something that like is like a clear stylistic choice, but it still feels like it works.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge fan of Kanan. I don't know if you guys are familiar with his work on Uber.
I'm not actually.
Yeah, it's like this. What if the Nazis won World War II?
Is that a new title or an older one?
No, it's an older. I think it was. I want to say Avatar. Yeah, back in like the early 2000s. Yeah, definitely check it. That's where I first saw his work. So, yeah, when Massive, approached me about doing some things, and I was looking through the various projects, I was like, "Oh, Kanan White, Ramgod, what's this?" Because again, it's just, I mean, you can see if you're watching this on YouTube, everybody, that cover for issue 1, or one of the covers for issue 1, it's so striking. It pulls you in. You want to learn more about it. So I'm glad to hear that you guys have been getting good feedback. Has there been anything that has surprised you now that issue 1 is finally out there? You've been waiting for this a long time.
Surprised.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm trying to think. But like besides me just like holding the issue like in my hand, basically like this, it just the ability for me to be able to do this. As I said, Morgan's had this experience before with stuff he's written and created. I have not. So,
I remember the first time I ever held a book in my hand that was printed for something I wrote, though. I think I cried. Like, I get it, dude. It's
I'm not a crier, so I'm not going to do that.
I'm a crier.
But But I will say that it was a special moment for me, and one that I hope to have many more of. So, yeah, I guess the surprise only maybe is how good it actually felt.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, here's the other part of it, and you could probably speak to this, Owen, with this idea of world building that you mentioned. It's such a great world that you've built, and such an interesting premise. Yes, this one, focuses on, father and son. There's nothing to say that Morgan can't come up with some other characters. There could be characters on the team now. We could, move forward in time. Hey, a couple seasons from now, new characters are created. You've created a framework here that really lends itself to any number of stories. So, maybe this first 6 issues is, focused on father and son, bank robbers, conspiracy, that sort of thing. Nothing to say you can't create new characters and with, again, Ramgod and the world you've built as the background, but continue this in any number of ways. Would you say that's true?
Yes, absolutely. Another great point, Jace, is so like I kind of say this a lot, but I always go back to it. It's important. It's like Morgan and I are native New Yorkers, right? Mm-hmm. So like kind of taking that mentality and like what our upbringing was, like being kind of, from Manhattan and whatever, our experience growing up was different than so many people's in that sense, and just the sheer volume and population density and how you're like ants, part of like a colony almost, and there's so many different things. As I said, we always like to take a tight lens to a big world where like Clint and Malcolm are just one little aspect of this massive world and the sports league in and of itself. And that we really put so much time into, like, as Morgan even mentioned, like the corporate sponsors and like who they are and what they do and what they represent. And like we highlight it and we give little breadcrumbs, and there's a lot of stuff we actually used in the margins that you can see. That's kind of like as if you were playing a video game and it's like the UI kind of stuff that we just little Easter eggs that we kind of throw in there. Just further this kind of world. And like what, as you just said, like there's a lot of other things going on and threads we can pull, and we will pull as this kind of series expands.
Like you'll see there's like the A storyline is obviously the Ramgod sport, and the fact that there's one of the teams is a crew of bank robbers, right? And then there's I don't know if this would be so much the B storyline, but like the interpersonal storyline is the Clint and the father and son aspect, which obviously plays into like the main narrative. But then you'll see there's like a C storyline that talks about like some other characters that are like not as central to maybe the first mini arc, but that are leading up to something that will set up the story for, mini arc 2, right? Season 2 kind of thing. So, echoing what Owen was saying, the goal for us was to make sure that we didn't just like wrap everything up at the very end and like that's the end, but closing one loop, but then setting the stage for something else and something bigger. And as coming full circle to what Owen's saying, the tight lens on a big world. When you're inside of New York City growing up, for us, we never saw the skyline. We never got to see the silhouette of what the whole city looks like against the backdrop, right? Because we just look around and you see buildings and shops and streets and whatever else and stores. So that's what we mean by like the tight lens. But if we were to zoom out and pull out, that doesn't mean there's not a lot of other storylines like going on throughout the city and the world. So
we all think we're the protagonists of our own stories, right?
Yeah, but we're not. Maybe I'm just the side character kind of thing. Like, so we have other characters that we've already planned backstories for and sort of like other threads we can pull on. And as this, as we see sort of fans' reactions to things and seeing like who their favorites are, we can obviously like lean into those more for season 2, because we've already set the stage for it and planned it out, but we haven't begun working on it yet. We have to see how this one does first before we start spending time and money on continuing it forward. But our goal and hope is to continue to have this be like an ongoing series. So.
Yeah, it would be fantastic if it gets to that level, which, based on the first issue, the quality's there. And I almost think, and again, a little cart ahead of the horse, it's almost like, all right, you guys continue this main story, make it an ongoing, playing with various characters and focus on various characters, what have you. But again, I think the world is so rich, it lends itself to stories so well. It's like you could even invite other characters in under this framework. Other creators, to say, hey, what's your take on, this rookie trying to make it on the the crowdfunded team or something along that lines, because again, I just think the premise is so rich, and I think the sky's the limit really with the amount of stories you can tell with this foundation.
Appreciate that. Yeah,
So,
we hope, as we said, like we're like world building is kind of our thing. At least it's mine, and something I'm looking to really kind of get my hands dirtier with. So we would love to be able to kind of bring in other creators and be able to expand this world for sure, without a doubt.
Yeah, be fantastic. So again, everybody, the first issue is already out. If your local comic shop doesn't have it, you can go to Massive Publishing and order the first issue. There'll be a link in the show notes to check it out. But when you go to your local comic shop, now's the time to tell them, hey, I want this series. I want issue 2. Issue 2, I think, is out on I want to say the 28th. Is that right? August 28th. So now's the time to let your comic shop know so they can pre-order you a copy of issue 2. It's always the lifeblood of a series, and for your comic shop really helps a lot to pre-order. So again, link in the show notes to go and order issue 1. If you can't find it at your local comic shop, be sure to let them know you want issue 2. If anybody wants to follow along with your work online, where's the best place to follow you to?
I would say our studio, which is Dark Rose Studio, so it's at Dark Rose Studios.
Yeah, that's our kind of like our IP creative studio, development studio. So
because Ramgod is just like one of several stories and titles that we've created, and they all, for the most part, start as comics or graphic novels, and then we sometimes branch them out into board games, which is one of the things we've just done simultaneously, like recently with one of our other stories. So at Dark Rose Studios or darkrosestudios.com, we'll take you to kind of show you everything we got going on right now.
Great. I'll put links.
We'll put the links.
Yeah, I'll put links in the show notes to the website and the social media, everybody. So if you're having trouble finding them, go there. Can't recommend Ramgod issue 1 highly enough. The art is amazing. If you're familiar with Kane and White, you know the detail and the care he puts in. Fantastic storytelling skills visually, and just a really, really interesting story. So congrats on the first issue, guys. I know it was a long time coming, so it's great that it's finally out there. And yeah, just appreciate the time. Best of luck with continuing the series.
Appreciate it. Great questions.
And to all you listeners, we appreciate you joining us as always. We appreciate the support, and we'll talk to you next time.
Peace.